quiet.
All right. Thank you for tuning in to Watching the World and also DJ Genesis of Detroit. And we're privileged today to have along with us a criminal attorney named Johnson. Could you please tell us a little bit about you and where everyone can find you?
Well, first of all, I'm a practicing attorney, a criminal defense attorney for the last 25 years. I'm located in Dallas, Texas. My website is theywon'tletmeout.com. My phone number to my office is 214-565-5600. And I can be reached by email at attorneycalvindjohnson@gmail.com. So that's the way you can get in touch with me. I've been doing criminal defense work for the last 25 years on the local, state, and federal levels. I've handled all kinds of cases involving human trafficking, sex cases, drug cases, cases from all over the spectrum in the criminal defense area.
Wow, you cover a lot. I want to ask you a question. I'm in the courtroom every day, observing, taking everything in, but I'm so curious. What are people saying in the streets about this case? What are you hearing in court and among your friends and family?
Well, it seems like the latest witnesses have given a lot more information, a lot more detail. And when I say that, it seems like the latest witnesses that have been called to the stand have less problems for the prosecution. There are a lot of juicy details that have been exposed during some of their direct examination, and it seems to be that a lot of the later information from these witnesses from this week, a lot of it is very, very hard to challenge because they're basically just kind of going through their experiences with Sean, working for Sean Puffy Combs and the P. Diddy organization. And it really, really seems like you have some people like that are either extremely close to him, or they're extremely knowledgeable in the way that he operates his organization. And that's of high concern for Puffy. And it seems like this information this past week was extremely damaging to his case.
Okay, very good. I want to ask you this. When it came to the pre-court conference where the judge is speaking with the attorneys, it came up about the DNA testing because they found that it was a female's DNA on the bottle that was used as a Molotov cocktail.
Mm-hmm.
But they used the term 403 and 702 objections. Is that something you could explain?
Well, what that really deals with is the kind of information that is allowed to be led into evidence. You understand what I'm saying? So when there are certain rules of evidence that they use in the federal system, even in the state system, and you have what they call a Rule 403, and then you have what they call a Rule 702. I'm trying to give you a short version because I don't want this to become a law class, but at the same time, there are certain rules of evidence that need to be followed, okay? And you got to understand those rules. And when the 403 rules of evidence, basically, to read it from you, basically, the federal rules of evidence governs the exclusion of relevant evidence on grounds of prejudice, confusion, or waste of time. Specifically, the court allows court to exclude evidence even if it's relevant. If its probative value, its usefulness in proving a point is substantially outweighed by the potential for unfair prejudice, or confusion of the issue. So basically what you have is you have a situation where they can exclude evidence if it's going to be confusing, right? So that's one issue. Then the other part of it is you have 702, which I will go to next, because what I try to do is I want to give you just a general summation of kind of what happens. And so basically, if you're going to give expert testimony, you want to make sure that if something needs to be, let's say, if you have something as an expert, right? You have somebody as an expert, you got to, number one, set up the criteria. You got to show what they do, how they're doing it. You got to make sure that expert testimony is reliable. Just because somebody is an expert at something, they have to lay the proper groundwork to be able to put that potential information out. So you don't just have experts coming in testifying only to benefit the side that's paying them. So those are the two rules that are in place.
Okay, that helps me to understand much better. In the case of Capricorn Clark, she had started working for Diddy, I believe, around 2004 to 2012. And initially, remember I told you when Dawn Richard came and took the stand, she painted the picture that Diddy was a mob boss
Mm-hmm.
because she talked about how Cassie was beaten. A skillet was either thrown at her or tried to hit her with it. Diddy drags her upstairs, and then the next day he takes Don Richard into the studio along with, I think her name is Colleen or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically says, "Listen, love is about passion. However, where I'm from, if you run your mouth, you can be killed, right?" And so immediately
Mm-hmm.
objection, the whole courtroom goes crazy. I'm actually sitting there looking at the jury. They look very confused about the statement. But now we have another occurrence of this with Capricorn Clark. She said that she previously worked for Suge Knight and that
Mm-hmm.
Diddy kind of found out about that. He took her on the first day to Central Park and told her, you know, I may have to kill you if you're dealing with Suge Knight. Is this RICO, mob boss? What's happening here?
I think what the prosecution is painting the picture of is somebody that is trying to be who is really powerful, who has control of a lot of different moving parts, who, when he's put in a position, if he thinks you're disloyal, he can start breaking the law. He's willing to go to any extent to show people that they need to be afraid of him, that he has control of everything and he can make certain things happen. And I think that's setting the jury up to think, hey, when A happens, and if Puffy doesn't like it, he's going to make B happen. And so I think that what they're doing is setting up the mindset of Puffy. And so that when the jury looks at Puffy, they don't just look at him as a regular person. They looked at him as a head of an organization, somebody who can make things happen, who can make people uncomfortable, who are disloyal to him.
Okay, she went on to explain with the help of the prosecutor that there are three security guards involved: Bonds, D-Rock, and also Rue. And in this particular case, also Paulie, Uncle Paulie, they called him. In this case at Central Park, he's standing in the background. She says he's stoic, and she says he wears sunglasses 100% of the time, almost like she's intimidated. What is this painting for us?
Basically, it's making him look like a mob boss. It's making him look like he is the orchestrator. So, for example, you put the sunglasses on, you can't see his eyes, you can't see his face. He has his goons who basically do security. And so, basically, what you're doing is you're painting a picture of, you got three big guys that do security. You got him with his sunglasses on. All the three guys work for him. They're big guys that do security, willing to do anything for Puffy. And you're just this little old bitty innocent female woman out in the middle of Central Park who's accused of being disloyal. And I think what they're doing is they're setting the mindset of the jury so that they think about that when they look at Puffy. You don't want to look at Puffy just as a regular guy who doesn't know everything that's going on. You want to make him look like he's the orchestrator of everything. And he has all of these big, strong guys, people, money, and things at his disposal.
Okay. So they're at Central Park. By means of the prosecution, they're painting a picture like Diddy is really intimidating her. Under cross, it came out with Brian Steele. Well, when did you first get to Central Park? oh, we were there earlier in the day. So it went from being like a incident where we're taking you to Central Park to threaten you to we're already at Central Park. Why is the prosecutor seems to be just pointing in on a very negative story when there's a bigger picture at play? There's more context.
Well, what they're trying to do is show that firsthand, this is the way his organization operates. They're trying to show that, hey, this is what he can do. This is how he intimidates you. As soon as you start working with him, he gets in your head. He lets you know in the beginning that if you don't do what he tells you to do, if you do something that's disloyal or that could harm him and his organization, he can make you pay with your life. That's the way they're trying to make him look like. And that's why they're spending so much time doing that. But I think the prosecution is smart. And they're basically calling the question the Central Park thing because think about it. You got Central Park, it's going to be out in the open. Anybody can see it. Anybody can tape it. So they're going to ask questions to try to trip that line of questioning up to show, hey, this didn't happen. And even if you were in Central Park, it wasn't for the reason of threatening you and showing you what he can and can't do to you that's negative.
Okay. So Diddy has this big event and he borrows from Jacob the jeweler. I think it's a Jesus piece necklace, a bracelet, and a watch full of diamonds. And so Capricorn Clark is going through the airport. She's heading to Miami. And all of a sudden, she discovers that these items are missing. And so she says she calls the office back at, I think it's like 1440 Broadway, and says, lock everybody down and let's search for these items. And so I believe she proceeded to go back to that office also. It ended up where Diddy's security take her home. They search her house. And also she says she had a roommate. She made it appear that her roommate's possessions were searched also. They couldn't find anything. So he told her, this is the security guard. I'm going to pick you up in the morning. He comes in the morning. He brings her back to pretty much an abandoned building because Bad Boy was in between their old office and new. So they talk about this dilapidated building. She says he takes her inside the building. They lock it from the outside behind her. And they paint this picture like a movie, like you can actually hear the lock clink,
Click,
right?
click. Mm-hmm.
And then they go to the 6th floor. She says there's a man sitting at a table with folding chairs, and he's just smoking one smoke right after the other. And he sits her down and basically to give her a lie detector test. And she says that he's 5 times as wide as she is. And basically he told her, we're going to give you this lie detector test, but if you don't pass it, you're going to end up in the East River. What is your take?
Well, this is the thing. Once again, they're trying to make him look like he is just somebody who, when something happens, he can actually have the ability to take your life, and he has the resources to do so. And I think what happened in this situation, of course, I would imagine that necklace probably worth $500,000, maybe even $1 million. Some of these necklaces that Jacob the jeweler makes. But what they're trying to do is to show the power. Once you start working for Puffy Combs, if you get out of line, if something happens that's not supposed to happen, he can make something happen to you. So it's like once you get in, once you gang, you can't gang out. I mean, once you gang, you in. That means you can't get out. You don't leave out. Once you are part of the team, you stay a part of the team. And if you're disloyal, they make sure that they get rid of you.
She said that this went on for 5 days of the security guard picking her up, taking her in, and she was being subjected to all of these lie detector tests. And the first ones were inconclusive. So this little old, it probably sounds like an Italian mob boss. You kind of get the soprano feeling. He's telling her, listen, you need to calm your nerves here, or else you're going to end up in the East River. What's your thoughts?
Man, what they're trying to do is show that Puffy, and you think about it, he brings the Italian guy in. I mean, come on now. It's going to make him look like he's a mob boss. Now, everybody knows, everybody's watched every mob movie known to man. And in all those mob movies, somebody ends up in the East River if they don't do something they're supposed to do if they do some shaky, funny business, if they steal, if they're disloyal, if they don't pay their due. You know that's the way it looks. And so they're trying to paint this picture that that's what's happening. So one of the things that I think that the defense definitely has to do is call all this into question. And they got to call the prosecution out on this. Listen, we know what this is. They're trying to make him look like a mobster. This is stuff from a mob movie. So they're trying to get in your minds to make you think this is a mob movie and he's a mobster. And what do we do with mobsters? We pop them with the RICOs. So that's what they're trying to do. So, and I think that Brian Steele and his crew need to be very transparent when they talk to the jury, when they have that conversation. That's what I would do.
Now, speaking of Brian Steele, under cross-examination, he asked her, and he really broke it down nicely. You say you're there 5 days. How long did it take to administer one lie detector test? And she explained how all of these things were hooked up to her chest, her arms, her hands, right? So he's like, so if you're there all week, how on earth does this work with lie detector tests? What do you think about that as far as swaying the jury?
And see, that's where it sounds like it sounds like something out of a movie, right? And I think that if I was Brian Steele and if I was the defense of Puffy Combs, I would say, hey, look, y'all know what they're doing. We're not stupid. We're smart, right, jury? They're trying to make him look like a mob boss. Now, does this make any sense? Who would show up 5 days in a row to go to a dark building, a dilapidated building, to continue to take lie detector tests? It doesn't even make sense. None of this makes sense to you. You know why it doesn't make sense? Because they're trying to make this man, who you may not like, who has some sexual proclivities that you don't care for. They're trying to make him look like a mob boss so that so you guys will find him guilty on the RICO. That's not what's happening here. That's exactly what I would say, because having somebody come to a building for 5 days hooked up to lie detector stuff doesn't make any sense to me. And I would kind of blow it off and not say blow it off, but I would kind of relay that idea to the jury so that they understood what's going on in that courtroom.
Right. Now, the prosecutors, they say, how did this make you feel? And in her exact words, she says, I was petrified. It's almost like they're painting this whole big movie for the jury. Do you think that these type of testimonies where the witness is crying on the bench profusely, it has a great impact on the overall case?
It can, because you have some people, and like I told you about juries when we first started talking about this, you don't get juries like you and me, right? You and me, we're going to be affected by some of the crime, but we're also going to be smart enough to know that there's two sides to every little bit of a coin, right? But if you have somebody who has not lived and been around folks in that lifestyle, or that has an open mind about what people will be willing to do for money, what people are willing to do when they're being pressured by the government, if you have people that don't see it that way, and you got a woman up there crying, and you got this multi-billionaire or this billionaire sitting there being able to pull all those strings, it could have an effect on the jury.
Okay. They're trying to also push a narrative about forced labor. Let me explain. In the case of Capricorn Clark, she explains basically that when she first started working there, she went on her first assignment. For the first day, she was ready to go home. She got a call on the way home saying, hey, you have to go to the studio with Puff. She ended up being there to the next day at 1. Turns out she never got any sleep for the first 4 or 5 days. She said on average, she was working 24 hours a day. On a good day, she'd get 4 hours sleep. On a bad day, 2 hours sleep. So this whole thing about forced labor, what do you think? Does that tie into the RICO?
I think it does, in a sense, because it makes it look like that this man doesn't care about the people that work for him, number one. Number two, once you start working for him and you get used to your salary, you have no way out. See, some people understand what they call financial slavery, in a sense. So if this man is the way I pay my bills and pay my car note and take care of my children, and if he wants me to work a bunch of hours and don't want to pay me for him, I kind of got to do it because I don't have any other options, because I'm already tied into him. And when people do this, it means like he's a rule breaker. He's somebody that is only going to use people to his advantage, and he's not going to take care of those people by paying them. And he's going to get around what the law says because he needs to make sure he gets out of you what he needs to get out of you. And that's the kind of pressure and that's the kind of presence that Sean Puffy Combs and his organization exhibits over a regular individual, a young, impressionable person who cannot say no to.
Right. Now, she also spoke about how she was involved. Last week, I told you how his executive assistant, David James, I believe his name was, he was
Mm-hmm.
advancing these rooms, setting them up with the drugs and
Mm-hmm.
all of the baby oil. Well, she tells a similar story of her doing the same thing, advancing these rooms and the writer and so forth. She said that when she would go in the room, she would also have to clean them afterward. And there were baby oil prints on the velvet fabrics and also on the wall. And the rooms were so bad. In fact, the previous week, the hotel manager, he said that they would take $1,000 deposit from Diddy, and they knew that once the room was used, they'd have to shut that room down for a whole week just to get it back together because it was in such disrepair.
Mm-hmm.
Having these assistants come in one after the other, selling the same narrative about advancing rooms, baby oil, drugs. One thing, though, I'll say this: they're telling different drugs. They're not coherent with that. But anyway, having these individuals do that, how does this affect the RICO?
It affects Rico greatly because basically what it is basically saying is he's directing these people to come in and do things after he does these illegal after he has these free costs, which means it affects the RICO because it basically is saying, hey, I'm going to have my people do all the setting up, do all the cleaning up. It's almost like you got a cleanup team. It's like you got the cleaner, right? A cleanup team that comes behind you after you once you do your dirty work. They're gonna come clean it up. And then you've had several people do that, and you have a whole method, mode, and operation dedicated to doing this type of thing. And so what they're trying to show once again that this is an organization. It's a RICO. It's a repetitive act. It's a mode of criminality and operation that appears to happen again and again and again, even with different people. Even though the people change, the head up top doesn't change, and that's Puppy. That's what they're going to try to say.
Oh, okay. I don't know if you heard the rumor about Laura London and that somehow she was involved in this freak off. That did not come out in court. So that's a pattern that I often run into attending the trial. Basically, the story went this way, and it was very simple. Diddy was in the kitchen with Laura London because Laura London was Cassie's friend, and also the chef who also he had beat her at some point. That's the allegation. But anyway, at this particular point, he had Laura London, Chef Jordan, I believe is her name, and he said, "You know why you bees don't have a man?" You know, and then he called Cassie and told her to come stand here, bend down, stand up, turn around, turn this way, walk over here, walk back. And he says, now get out of the room. And he basically told them, this is why you don't have a man, you don't listen. What are they trying to establish with that story?
Man, first of all, if you have women jurors on that jury, they're not going to like that very much because what they want to do is they also want to personally turn some of the jurors against Puffy. Number one, number two, once again, they make him look like he's Oz, like he's the controller. That yet you, as a woman being around here, around him, you have to do what you're told. You're not doing what you want to do on your own free will. You're doing it based on the fact that he told you to do it. And if he tells you to do something, you have to do it. And that's the issue that when it runs with the RICO. It's going to be like these women are not doing stuff freak offs on their own free will. They doing the freak offs because they know what's going to happen if they say no. They're only doing what they told because they have to do what they're told. And that's kind of what they're trying to lay out.
Okay. So under the prosecution section, right, Capricorn came across very believable. She was crying, very sad. It really came out how she really wanted to get her job back. So under the defense, they showed how as close as last year, August, she was asking to be his director, his chief of executive, or something of that sort again. Why would that be the case, you think, under these circumstances of abuse?
Oh, that she was asking the supervisor what could you cut out?
She want to get her job back, working for Diddy after all that.
Well, see, that's the thing that's the thing that Diddy is going to say. If you did not like it, if I was so controlling, then why you want to come back? And that's something that the defense they have to say, because you have to realize these people, they didn't just work for Puffy for a short period of time. It seems to be that when somebody worked for Puffy, they worked for him for a long period of time, and then they worked with him in a bunch of different situations. And it seems to me that there had to be opportunities for me to leave. If I'm working for this man and I don't like what's going on here, I can easily start looking for another job somewhere else. And then if I want to come back, then it must mean that, hey, as bad as I say it was, I was okay with dealing with it. So it was on my free will that, hey, number one, I was able to leave. Nothing happened to me, but I was able to come back because I want to come back. And so that's what you want to show as a defense attorney. Hey, no, these people left on a free will. Nothing happened to them. And I guess the work environment must have been decent or good because they wanted to come back and work for him.
Okay, so they painted the picture of this instance as kidnapping. Is kidnapping in itself a part of a RICO?
It is. Because if you
Okay.
get somebody to do something against their will, that can be part of the RICO.
Okay. So I told you the first story. Well, we have story number 2. When Kid Cudi's house is broken into, Diddy shows up. He finds out that Cassie is cheating with Kid Cudi. He goes to Capricorn's house 5:30 in the morning, according to what's being testified. He has a gun. She claims he's waving it at her and waving it around. He says, "Get your clothes on, get in the car. We're going to go kill this N-word."
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They end up going over to Kid Cudi's house while Diddy and his security guard, they said Rue. That's what they said, right?
Mm-hmm.
While they're in the house, she calls Laura London. She also calls Cassie. Cassie tells Kid Cudi what's going on. Kid Cudi's like, he calls Diddy, say, "Hey, where you at? You in my house?" So she's saying she was kidnapped for this event. What do you
Mm-hmm.
think about that?
Well, see, that's important because that means you're taking somebody against their will. That means you're furthering in your criminality. Not only are you breaking into somebody's house and you're making people go where they don't want to go. And the reason why they have to go isn't because of their free will. They're going because you have the power. You're orchestrating everything. You're going to make something happen to them. So they want to make it seem like that even when somebody did something allegedly on their own free will, that they didn't have a choice because of the power that he wielded.
Oh, wow. Now they had the police officers come in, and what's interesting to me, under cross-examination, the police officers said that no one reported a gun. Brian Steele says, "Is it fair to say that the word kidnapping wasn't used?" So how do we get everybody spreading this whole thing about a burglary? In the police report, it only says that Diddy trespassed, and that's why he did not get charged with burglary.
And see, what typically happens is the officer will walk up to the person and ask them, do they want to press charges or they just want to give them a trespassing. So sometimes the officer has leeway along with the alleged victim can say, hey, we're good. I just don't want them coming over here no more. So sometimes that can be a trespassing. So what you can have in that situation is you can have somebody say, hey, he did do this. I just really didn't want to press charges. And the officers decided to give him a trespass instead of a burglary. And some and that's a little insight that a defense attorney like myself knows. Hey, you give him that trespass, and that means if he even comes over to Kid Cudi's house again, that's an automatic arrest.
Okay, so the police officers first they establish how the dispatch work, and it's very clear when the dispatcher sends out a car, they kind of define what they're running into. So if there's a gun, kidnapping, fire, what have you, then they get the fire department involved. In this
Mm-hmm.
particular case, it was labeled as such of a burglary. It was mentioned. The
Mm-hmm.
police officer said that when he pulled up to Kid Cudi's house up the hill, There was a
Mm-hmm.
black Escalade sitting in front of it and pulling off. He said he took down the license plate and did not do anything further because there was no criminal act involved at that point. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
that sound weird? Uh, wouldn't you imagine that they would stop that car?
You would imagine you would stop it, but once again, you don't know what if the car is, depending on how Kid Cudi's house is. Is it related to what just happened? Are they just pulling away? Was it just parked in front of there? Now you can use the discretion to stop it, but you don't have to stop it. Most people would say, yeah, you probably should stop that car or that vehicle. And that would sound a little weird to me if I was a defense attorney or a prosecuting attorney or even a defense attorney. Why y'all didn't stop it and inquire more?
Right. Under cross examination, Brian Steele says, is it true that the owner was at the house previously too, and that they stood up objection, because I guess of the narrative that was being painted. However, the police officer said they searched the home for about 15 to 20 minutes. They saw that there were luxury designer bags on the table, nothing taken. I believe there was some jewelry. Because remember, Kid Cudi said these were gifts that allegedly Diddy had opened, that it was around Christmas time in late 2011.
Mm-hmm.
When they left the building and they went back out through this little gate, they said this black Escalade was going back down the hill, and still they didn't stop him because they said that there was no criminal act.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the deal is you don't want to stop that SUV and then say it's no probable cause and anything they find and get thrown out. I think they should have stopped it, but they didn't. But I think that because of that being said, that's probably why it's kind of a judgment call. But that's probably why you would want that SUV to get stopped, especially coming from a location where these alleged acts happened at. But once again, that's a judgment call on the officers. And I would imagine, to be honest with you, because we're being frank, they know Puffy and his power and those issues. And I think they're trying to be delicate about even that investigation when you're dealing with stars. Because you have to realize in New York, you're dealing with a lot of star power. LA, New York and LA, you're dealing with a lot of star power, a lot of people of power. Sometimes they don't want some of the issues with the celebrities to get out, so they try to keep their stuff on the low. So I would imagine something like that probably occurred.
Under the prosecution, when they were questioning the witnesses, Kid Cudi, Caprican, Clark, Cassie, they almost describe like a movie. They're racing behind each other in the cars. They're trying to get Kid Cudi. The police officer said that he did not see any of that.
Hold on for a second. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Hold on really quick.
All right, everybody. We'll give him a second to take care of a matter. So we're covering the third week of the Sean Diddy Combs trial. I've been attending the trial every day, and I'm reporting what I'm hearing and seeing, observing in the courtroom. It's quite amazing to see what's happening with this case, because oftentimes the media has this perception of the case, but from what I see in the courtroom, it's still a tight race as far as the prosecutors and the defense go.
Okay,
all right,
sorry
so
about
I'll let
that,
you
everyone.
get back in.
I was gonna say at some point we want to go read some of the comments.
Okay,
we will.
I think
I can hear a little stat. Okay, great.
Yeah.
It was her. Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that, my man. Of course, in the real life happens. But in any event, yeah, that's what they're trying to do. And I think when you look at the SUV situation, it's a judgment call. To me, they should stop the SUV. But I think because of the celebrities involved, I think they're being very careful about that kind of stuff.
Okay. So we had this, before I get into the arson investigator, why don't you tell everybody who you are that's new to the room and how they can find you?
I'm attorney Calvin D. Johnson. I have a law office here in Dallas, Texas. I've been a practicing criminal defense attorney for the last 25 years. I've handled RICO cases. I've handled federal cases at the federal level, the state level, and the local level. So I have a vast amount of experience dealing with the issues that are actually involved in the Sean Puffy Combs cases. I've actually been practicing, once again, like I said, for 25 years, and about 90% of my practice is criminal defense work. So that's who I am. I can be reached at attorney Calvin D. Johnson at gmail.com, the whole word spelled out. I can be reached on my website is at theywon'tletmeout.com. And I can reach at 214-565-5600 for all your criminal matters and actually entertainment matters as well.
Okay. And I was watching the world. I'm covering the Diddy trial every day. I've been in the courtroom from the very beginning of the trial. And in fact, many of us in the audience are able to see all the expressions of the jurors, Diddy, and even when the case gets really bad, we get to understand how each person in the room is moving, and it's quite the experience. Let's look at some of the comments. I will say at this point, we're going to finish out, but about 10 minutes before we end the stream, we're going to allow some of you to come up and ask the criminal attorney, Calvin Johnson, some questions, and we'd like for you to only come up and give a 2-minute reply, and then we'll move on and give someone else the opportunity. My A-list journey says this is a solid channel for trial information. Good job. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Oh, Diddy's in the office, and Diddy says Diddy is innocent. All right. So we have Diddy in the audience, somebody by that name. F. Waffle House Jackson, Diddy is not innocent. And then, let's see. Angela Bigelow says she tried to get back with him because she was blacklisted and no one would hire her.
And I think that's important to let's go with that point. Sometimes when you work for somebody like Puffy, the celebrities, they have a group of folks sometimes they hire from because that's a big job to work for Puffy Combs. And so if your last job is working for Puffy Combs and he won't give you a good recommendation, sometimes you don't have a choice but to go back and work for him. And I think that's what they're going to be implying.
Okay, very good. Me121 says, but here's the thing, it's not just for mob bosses anymore. RICO has been used against gangs, drug cartels, corporate fraud, public officials, and high-profile celebrities.
Exactly. And listen, we're not saying that it has not been used against those groups, but I think in this situation, they're definitely trying to make him look like he's a mob boss. That he, especially when you look at the Italian guys, and then you got the people in the abandoned buildings in the rooms. Those are some of the tactics that were used in some of the old mob movies, and so that's why I used it as a mob kind of correlation. But you're right, they've used it against gangs, drug cartels, corporate fraud, and public officials, and high-profile celebrities. And the thing that I think all of these things share, there are a lot of powerful organizations that you can use this law against. And the reason why you use this law is because the people at the top shield themselves from the stuff in the middle at the bottom. And so they're using RICO to pierce that veil.
Okay, Marcus says Cassie left and came back voluntarily, all consenting adults, and Cassie set up the freak-offs.
Well, that's one of the things as a criminal defense attorney I will point to. She wanted to do them. She was setting them up, sometimes with requests to certain people, basically saying, I can't wait till we do the next one. And so if I'm Puffy, if I'm a man, I'm going to say, this is what she enjoyed. I'm just providing the woman that I'm with, even though unconventional, this is something she liked to do, and I'm allowing her to do it.
Okay. So getting back to the event that we were just discussing about Kid Cudi and what happened at his house, the Arson detective came in and gave us a really interesting narrative. Apparently, a couple days after the first incident that many have framed as a burglary, but according to the police report, was only a trespass, and Diddy was never charged with burglary. That's key to take in and understand. But a couple days later, someone cut open the top of the canvas. So he has this black Porsche.
Convertible.
It's sitting against the garage, and there's two cars behind it. So The police officer had previously said that this was targeted because you couldn't see the car from the road. Someone came in to get this car in particular. They cut open the roof. Next week out, we'll have some exhibit pictures that we'll get off the line and show you. Also, keep in mind, there's another Porsche inside the garage that no one ever questioned as to anything about it. That came out under cross-examination with Brian Steele. But anyway, an individual in which they've only found DNA from the bottle to be a female. They cut open the top of the roof, this canvas roof of the car. They drop in a Molotov cocktail that has gasoline in a 40-ounce Old English bottle, and it has a designer silk cloth inside it, set on fire, dropped, but the way it fell, it did not do the damage that they expected. Under testimony from the arson detective, he said that if it had hit its target, the house could have caught on fire, and also the two cars behind it. But anyway, here's my question for you. The detective said that they pulled fingerprints off of the bottle, and they also did fingerprints on the car and so forth. He never followed up. He testified he never followed up on any of these fingerprint reports, like what happened. And on top of that, it came out in court that the fingerprints went missing. The cards went missing, and the defense immediately asked for a mistrial.
Well, I'm going to tell you, if I'm the defense, I'm definitely going to ask for a mistrial. I'm definitely going to ask, well, why didn't y'all run that? Y'all should have ran that immediately. If I'm a detective and I've been doing police work for a number of years, I'm automatically going to run those fingerprints. I'm automatically going to run that DNA against CODIS. So why didn't that happen? Now, of course, the prosecution is saying that Puffy made it disappear. But if I'm a defense attorney, I'm going to be like, there's no proof that any of that happened. I'm just going to say, hey, look, y'all should have ran those fingerprints. If you're looking for trying to get to the bottom of the things, police work 101A tells you that if you got fingerprints, you run them. And they didn't do that. And so I'm definitely going to say that that's reasonable doubt that we had anything to do with that. Kid Cudi may have other enemies.
Right. Do you know what the judge said? The judge basically, anyway, I'll come back to that. So, because we're running out of time, let's get to Nash really quick. As far as the beating in the back of the head, they framed this case basically that Cassie was being beat, domestic violence. But now in this story, he explains that the stylist, he testified that Diddy was beating him in the back of the head. He also testified that this girl, Mia, him and Mia both jumped on Diddy's back to try to stop him from beating Cassie. And he basically threw Mia. She hit the wall. He picked Cassie up and threw her down her eye. That's how she got the big gash over her eye that we see on the picture. So now that we're out of the scope of a domestic violence, how does it affect that he's beating the chef and also the stylist?
But once again, if I'm a defense attorney, I'm going to question the fact that these things happen because nobody really filled out reports. A, B, even if that is true, that's not a RICO. That's me being abusive. I should be charged with assault, and I should be charged with domestic violence if I even did those things. Those are the best arguments that I can make as an attorney. But I'm just going to say, hey, these things don't equate to a RICO. You know, it equates to me being him being a bad person, him assaulting someone, which he should be charged with assault in that situation. But even with that being said, why was it that nobody made any police reports? Nobody did any of those things that typically people do when that happens? As a defense attorney, is that the strongest way to deal with it? Maybe not, but that's sometimes what I have at my disposal as a criminal defense attorney. And those are things that I'm going to assert to see how that jobs with the jury.
So still with this, Deontay Nash, the same narrative. In pre-discussion before they brought the jury back in, whatever this conference is, the big discussion that they had is that this guy, Deontay Nash, in which he said, he basically described that Cassie was having her 29th birthday. Diddy wanted her to do a freak off on her birthday. And this witness, Nash, testified that Cassie said she did not want to go sleep with these men. How does this affect it?
It does affect it in a way because it makes it seem like that she's constantly being pushed into doing this. That it almost became a ceremony. It almost became something that was normal, and that now Puffy and his organization expected her to do. So that's why I think that that's important.
Okay. Unfortunately, we're running out of time here, so I'm going to get right to Mia, the last witness. And I think this was a crucial witness because she was brought on as an employee. What blows my mind about the case is that in these cases, the sex workers and people in their professional work were being hired from Craigslist. What do you think about that? Would you imagine that?
See, that's crazy for me because why would you go to Craigslist to get these kind of folks? And I'm going to tell you, the prosecutors are going to say because those people from Craigslist, they're number one, they're probably going to be a little bit under the radar and they're going to be willing to do a lot more than a regular worker would do, right? So if I got a college degree, if I got experience working in a company, Puffy calls me to do some BS, I'm not going to do it. But if I just came from Craigslist and I can't believe they hired me and I'm gung ho, I'm geeked out because I'm with Puffy and Cassie and I got this ability to stay these nice hotels and travel and they're treating me great. I'm making more money than I made in my life. If somebody from Craigslist, what they're going to do? They're going to continue to do it. They don't want to lose their opportunity to that access. And so that's why they're making a big deal about that. And the prosecution is being very deliberate by doing it. And so that's why they're saying what they're saying.
So she went on to explain that there were 4 times that she was assaulted. On his 40th birthday, he basically called her into the kitchen. Nobody else was there. And she explained how he did certain things to her that no woman would want it to happen. Mm-hmm. Another time, because she was packing all of his clothes and all his traveling accessories and so forth, she was in his room on the closet floor on her knees, packing his suitcase, and then he walks up with his midsection and then he violates her that way. You could just have to come to your own conclusion. Another time they were in the back of a private jet and the bathroom was at the back of the airplane and it goes through the final bedroom where there's a bed. She says she uses the bathroom. She comes out and Diddy's standing there. She gets violated. And then the final time that she explains in detail, because in Diddy's house, she was not allowed to lock the door. He said, in my house, you don't lock the door. So one night she was sleeping. All of a sudden, she felt the weight of a man bearing down on her. He took one hand, unleashed his pants, and we know what happened. So that's the 4 times. And then the prosecutor says, hey, were there other times? She says that there's pretty much too numerous to recount them all. What are your thoughts as far as a RICO?
Now that's a problem for him. Now I'm gonna tell you the reason why that's a problem for him is because number one, you're creating an environment where people can't say anything. You're creating an environment where you're covering all of your bad behavior up. Not only is this bad behavior, but it's being covered up by layers of different individuals. Now, if I'm a defense attorney, I'm gonna say, hey, first of all, none of this is proven. Nobody made any reports. And secondly, that would be a sexual assault. That wouldn't be a RICO. And so what's going to happen is you have on one end a bunch of different separate alleged bad acts that number one, Puffy's going to say he didn't do. Number two, even if they are, they don't equate to a RICO. But on the prosecution side, they're going to say, yes, they equate to a RICO because Puffy is only allowed to do this because he has set up an organization and a number of veils that you have to pierce to be able to get through to even hold him accountable. So that's where that RICO comes in. It's an organization that's around him that allows him to continue to do that. And that's what they're trying to show.
Okay, so the first assault happened on Diddy's 40th birthday, allegedly. Under cross-examination, Brian Steele was able to paint a different picture because as the years went on, they pulled up this whole collage of her social media posts where she's talking, Diddy, you changed my life. You're the greatest. You know, I'm just loosely speaking. But she painted year after year for his birthday, She also put together a scrapbook that was to build up his legacy. And in it, she speaks about him almost like being
God,
above other men or God. You see what I'm
yeah.
saying? So how does that affect the case that even they had her read some of the emails and also the text messages she wrote, and she would just come. The first day she had her head down, she was crying.
Mm-hmm.
The second day when she read these emails, it's like D-Rock, she's going a whole different person than what we saw the day before when she was talking about the abuse. Does this affect the case?
Yeah, I think it does affect the case because what it says is number one, she chose, because let me tell you something. I always put it like this: if I'm a defense attorney, I'm saying, look, people get to make choices. If they see something they don't like and they're uncomfortable, maybe they lose the money, but they don't have to work for somebody like that. But if they're comfortable with it and they're okay with everything going on, what do? They continue to work there. And not only do they work there are instances where you see in these text messages where they're giving great compliments to the person they're working for. They're having a great time. They're looking forward to seeing these people the next time. Even in the text messages are happy. So they're trying to make him look like some mob boss when these individuals are grown individuals who chose to continue to work under these circumstances and environments. And if you look at these text messages, the way that they make it look like it's a negative environment isn't a negative environment. So there's no RICO here. There's no RICO. What you have here is an individual that's grown enough that decided that these working conditions, whatever they may be, they're comfortable with. So those are the kind of arguments that I'm gonna make as a criminal defense attorney.
On day 10, they talked about how Cassie could not be recalled because she was pregnant or whatever the official reason is. Now, she had the baby, I believe, last week, Wednesday, Thursday night.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when we ended the day on Friday, they talked about two things. Mia being impeached for whatever reason, and perhaps even Cassie coming back. Is this possible or no?
I think it's possible, but it's kind of hard once a witness has been questioned to the hilt. I don't know if this judge is going to allow Cassie to be recalled. And because once you release a witness, you release them for the most part, unless they have to come back and rebut some of the other testimony of some of the other things. But I think they had Cassie on long enough to where I think that they were able to go through all the things they needed to go through. Maybe the recall of Mia maybe could happen, but it would only really happen if there was more additional information to rebut some other testimony that somebody else gave.
Okay, so I want to pause here. If anyone would like to come up and ask a few questions or what have you, now's the time because we're going to be shutting down in about 7 or 8 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Attorney Johnson, could you please tell us where we could find you and so forth for the new people in the room?
For the new people in the room, I'm Attorney Calvin D. Johnson. I can be reached on my website at theywon'tletmeout.com. I can be reached at 214-565-5600. And my email is the whole word attorney, Attorney Calvin D. Johnson at gmail.com. And look, me and Mel and DJ Genesis, we're going to be doing this every week. We give weekly recaps on all of the testimony inside the Sean Puffy Combs RICO trial. And Mel is there every single day, taking in all the information, reporting all the news out to the viewers and to the people out here in the social media world. And I'm Attorney Calvin Johnson, and I listen and I pay attention. And Mel and I are going to go over every single itty bitty detail weekly on the important issues that are happening in the Sean Puffy Combs Bad Boy RICO trial.
Okay. Now I have the utmost respect for you as a criminal attorney, but I think I have one for you that you might not be able to get around. Let's see if you can get around it. Okay. This is my final question to you. I'm going to see if you can get around this. They've now taken Jules, who is the sex worker that was in the hotel that we see the beating on CNN. Jules is the sex worker that's in the room. Now the prosecutors, as of Friday in their pre-conference, they're trying to frame it, and they have the Diddy's American Express. They have the flight log. They have that they were in LA. Jules was in New York. He's flying over. There's text messages that they have that they're communicating back and forth. I'm here. They said that there was metadata that Jules showed up on the hotel camera. Talk to us, Attorney Johnson.
Now, see, that's going to be a problem for Puffy. Now, we all may say, well, he's a sex worker, he's going to have sex, or he can go do what he wants to do. But when you start moving people around from around the country with the ability and with the methods of saying, hey, I'm bringing you for the purpose of having a freak off or having sex, then that becomes an issue because you're bringing people from either across the globe or across the country or across state lines, and you're deciding that you're moving them with the main and almost sole purpose of becoming involved in some sexual acts. And see, that's what the law does not allow. And I think when it comes to RICO, that's going to be an issue. Now, my flip side of that argument is that, hey, this is what this person does. They go from state to state. They have sex for money. This is what they're doing. They're doing it on their own free will. Nobody's making them do this. This person has done this hundreds of times in hundreds of other different situations. They just happen to be in another state, and they decided on their own free will that they wanted to come to be in the same city with Sean Puffy Combs. Now, one of the arguments that you're also going to make is, are they coming specifically for the purpose of having sex, or do they want to just come to New York to be coming to New York? And if something happens, something happens. They're grown individuals. They can make their choices, but nobody's making them come. They've decided that they want to come to New York and spend some time doing whatever they choose to do. That's the argument that I'm going to make. Is it a convincing argument? Maybe not, because the general public is going to view that particular thing, to me, in my eyes, they're going to view that as, hey, they're making this person come from this state to this state. They're paying this person. They're moving a body from one place across a country line, across a state line, to be able to participate in this very lewd sexual behavior. And I think that's a problem for Puffy.
So based on your professional opinion, do we have, based on week 3, a RICO shaping up?
I think we do have a RICO shaping up, because what you're having, remember, as I told you, you have little bitty droplets of information. It's almost like rat droppings before you get to the rat. They're dropping little bits of information about Puffy. Puffy can set cars on fire. He can make people do things that they don't want to do. He can have people come do things for him that he don't want to do. He can bring people from across the country. He can make somebody not press charges. He can make somebody, and see, what happens is you become more of a controller, right? You become more of a control, and the more you become of a controller, that's more of somebody doing a RICO, because you are actually involved in their criminal organization upon which you are at the top. But right now, they're dropping little bitty droplets right now. And the additional thing I told you is this: remember, and the more witnesses we get, right, the deeper we get into the state's cases, the witnesses for the state become what? More solid. They become more solid witnesses. They become witnesses that, for example, you got some things with Kid Cudi and Cassie and Dawn that you can really question strongly. But when it comes to Mia and it starts to come to some of these other people, it's a lot more difficult to call the testimony into question. And I think that as the state goes on, they're going to have their stronger witnesses toward the end.
So initially I started to bring up the judge, so I wanted to make that the absolute final question. When they asked for the mistrial, what had happened was the prosecutors, by way of the witness, was painting the picture that the 2 fingerprint cards were stolen or taken, as if Diddy had paid someone to do it. Okay, remember in the beginning of the trial, they already painted the picture that he's basically paid someone, because the original CNN or the fight in the hotel, that video went away, right? So this is the second time. The judge reprimanded basically Diddy's team or attorneys, because he said, listen, you allowed them to get in 2 or 3 questions deep without an objection. You should have objected on question number 1 when it was going there. So from your professional opinion, how does that work?
Well, this is what happens is to prevent them from getting into that, when you allow your witness to answer a question and you don't object. Remember, I talk about preserving error. the whole reason why Puffy is trying this case instead of taking a plea deal, because during the trial, if there's errors made, he can get another opportunity to get his case retried or get the whole thing thrown out if it goes too far. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to basically say, look, if you don't like a line of questioning and you think it's improper by the rules of evidence, you should object on the first question. Once you start letting them answer those questions, you're actually allowing the tree to grow branches and bear fruit. So basically it's like having a tree stalk. And if you stop the tree stalk by objecting, then there's no branches, there's no leaves, there's no fruit. But you can't let the tree get up there, grow some branches, grow some leaves, and then decide, no, I want to object now. No, it's too late in the process. You've already allowed that information to come to court. You should have objected in the beginning on question 1 as opposed to question 3 or 4. Now it's too late. And that's why your attorney's got to be on top of everything. See, when you're in trial, the reason why typically there's 2 attorneys sitting there, because one attorney has to pay attention to what's coming next, and one has to be engaged in the now.
Okay, I see. I want to end with this thought and also get your opinion and then close out with your information. The judge used an illustration for circumstantial evidence, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But he basically said if we're sitting in the courtroom and one person walks in with an umbrella and is dripping with water, and then another person comes in with a raincoat and is dripping from water, then you can rightly come to an assumption that it's raining outside.
Mm-hmm.
In a similar note, I feel like every day they're dropping more and more shoes on this case. So the minute you get over the kidnapping,
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole new case of arson. And when you get over to arson, they're paying sex workers at the door 3,000 or 4,000. They're flying them over state. It seems that they're going to win the case. If they win it, it would be over overwhelming evidence because they're just dropping so much. Is that something in court, or what do you think?
That is something in court, because if prosecution, this is how I end my closing statement. So Puffy just happened to be Cassie up. So Puffy just happened to fly sex workers over. So Puffy just happened to have people clean up his hotel rooms. So Puffy just happened. And what I do is I just happen them to death to the point where for him to be not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, all of these just happens. You have to believe all of them. And so what I would do is I'd put up about all of these little droppings, all these little situations that have come up, which it seems to me at this point, there's at least 30 or 40 situations. I would just happen the jury to death because all of these things didn't just happen. So as a prosecutor, these little droppings, you use them and you tie them together at the end so that the jury says, beyond a reasonable doubt, all of these things, for him to be not guilty, all of these just happens, would just have to be just happens. And so you tie all of these different 25, 35, 45 situations that are happening together and say that it's a RICO. And I think that's what they're trying to do, and I think smartly so.
Awesome. As always, wonderful to hear you break it down. You have static, Genesis. You have a lot of static.
Okay.
We want to thank you guys for tuning in to the channel today. We'll be doing this every week.
Yes.
At around 2 o'clock on Sundays. So tune in as we are privileged to have attorney Calvin Johnson break down the latest information involving probably one of the trials of our lifetime.
Yes.
And I did have one question I wanted to ask before we end.
Yes.
As far as having sex for money, okay, from what I see, it's a statewide offense and not a federal offense. So technically, they can't go off of prostitution. That's why I'm noticing that as a whole, you don't see them really making now the trafficking part, but the prostitution part is just being kind of
the sex trafficking alone is the issue for the feds, because we see sex trafficking cases going a lot with these pimps that are in Vegas that have women go all around the country, and basically they're just saying Puffy's a pimp in a different way by putting this RICO on them. So they can use the sex trafficking to get there. And I think that's what they're trying to do. And I think that's what they'll continue to try to do.
All right. So I guess that closes us out for the week. Look
Yes.
forward to seeing you next Sunday at around 2 o'clock at the same time.
Yes, and we will. 2 o'clock next Sunday will be fine. It'll be great. I'll make sure I'm on time, make sure I'm situated. And I'll be listening this week because I think this weekend, and this is the attorney and me telling you what's probably coming. If the prosecution is still on the stand, they're still going, their witnesses are going to get stronger and stronger and stronger as this case goes on. Because as a defense attorney, I know that prosecutors are going to want to leave their case at the end with a strong impression. So as these witnesses get deeper, they're going to be a lot harder to challenge for the defense. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, like I said, they're going to bring in, I believe, in my opinion, just being there every day, they're going to bring in Jules, that sex worker that was there the day she was beaten. And that's going to be a hard pill to swallow, right?
Yeah. See, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Somebody who doesn't really have a dog to hunt in the show. Somebody who was there. They're giving their impressions. They have no reason to lie. They've probably been saying what happened then, saying the same thing now. They're going to be a lot harder to cross-examine because you got to be careful with them. So that's why I said, as this case goes on, the prosecution's witnesses are going to get stronger and their cases are going to get stronger. That's how you build a case as a prosecutor.
All right. Thank you. We
All right.
appreciate you very much. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Bye.